All right, welcome back. This is Brandon Farr, and we're here continuing on our series of entrepreneurial conversations expressly to build depth in your business. These are business conversations. These are full depth, real deal. We're talking about MBA caliber topics, strategies, real things for your business. So if you own a business, you're looking to be in business, or you want to take your business to the next level, this conversation's for you. What's fun is we've been chatting a bunch. There's limitations to the one-way dialogue of video or podcast, but we covered a lot of territory. And, coming into this conversation here, it feels like a sense of completion, which is great. It doesn't mean we're done. It doesn't mean we won't talk again. It just feels like if you get this, I get all the way to this, you've covered a lot of ground. There's lots to work with. You have what you need to go the distance. I'm saying this out of reflection. Obviously, always more to learn, but let's just jump right in because this conversation is all about perceived value. And when I was walking through this in my mind, what I wanted to convey to you in these kind of soundbite moments, they're about 20 minutes long, perceived value is super important because it's what you're going to get paid for, but it's really going to have an influence on what you're able to charge. And what I'm saying by that is your customers, regardless of whether or not you're selling to a business or a private client, or we talked about relationship to their money and things like that, regardless of whether or not they have a value profile that's based on cost consciousness or productivity or quality or safety or delivery time and morale, they're going to be willing to pay more money for some things than they are for others. And there's a couple of guiding things in that that have served me really well. I'm going to use metaphors in construction to convey a topic that is going to be applicable in your industry, but you understand your industry. You're going to need to reflect and decide how this is applicable where you are. So in the contracting, what I want to say is framing, carpentry, so putting up 2x6s and building walls on a house that doesn't have any siding on it. That's framing. And once you see the windows in and the doors in, but you don't see any siding on, it's just plywood all the way around. That's called getting a house to lock up, which is a milestone in the construction process of a house. Interestingly enough, when I look at that, it's framing. Then there's the really fine, detailed work that goes on once the house is almost done. You got your there's another carpenter that comes in, a finish carpenter, and they put all the baseboards on. They might install your interior doors. They might install your cabinets. They're the folks that are doing the really tight joints and corners, because this is what you see when you walk into a house. So the work of the framer is all the stuff behind this wall. It's what holds the building up. The work of the finish carpenter is what makes the room seem beautiful and finished and detailed. Well, it's not to say finished carpenters or framers are different than one another. They might be wired differently, as a finished carpenter cares about, a 32nd of an inch on a miter joint, and a framing carpenter might be considered of an 1/8 of an inch, which is a significant difference when you're plus or minus an 1/8 than when you're plus or minus a 32nd. But so the philosophy that drives those two individuals might be different, but your customer's perception of value will also be different. I've talked a bit about how I price things. I typically look at how I sell our services or price our services for sale is on a daily rate. I tend not to look at my business through the lens of what's the market rate of painting versus what's the market rate of finishing carpentry versus the market rate of carpentry or concrete or something. I tend not to segment and go, well, the journeyman framer is making this and a journeyman painter is making that and stuff. It just doesn't work for me. Frankly, I don't want to view the market through that lens. I view my value of the business we offer as a solving problems for clients, and that means we're going to switch context quickly. So I would say we pick the highest rate for the services we provide, and we just do that across the board. And the value to you as our client is that we're going to take care of all of it. There's less transitions, timelines are compressed because we're not handing off the ball to different trades and so on. But I also recognize that some clients, most clients, have a perception of what they're willing to pay for as valuable. And that's sometimes, I'm thinking back as I'm saying this out loud, we've talked in previous discussions about green, yellow, red in terms of business from a risk profile. Green is in your core competencies, yellow is on the fringe of that, and then red is something that's outside of your domain of competency that poses a risk to you as far as a learning curve, or just a risk to the project or your business because it's just a high stakes endeavor. Well, I use the same green, yellow, red metrics in terms of profitability. So, and profitability in terms of what I'm able to charge. So if I want to make $2,000 a day, which seems very reasonable if you're in business, in trades, in our domain, it's like, and it's so interesting to me when I started these conversations, I conveyed to you that $17 an hour was all that I could muster to charge because that's all I felt I was worth. And then that evolved. And now I can honestly say, $2,000 a day seems very reasonable as a starting point. If you have a sense of maturity in your business and you're capable of delivering, that to me feels very realistic. So you need to work inside of your industry. And I'm not saying that there's people make a lot more money than that. That's the bite-sized piece for where I see. So looking at $2,000 a day, still with my client in mind, I realize that I can charge my daily rate for things like framing easier than I can charge that high rate for things like finishing. And I wanted to put this in context because if you could build an entire wall in a day and you look at, very simple example, you have 4 walls in a house. Okay, imagine it's going to take you 1 day per wall. Okay, so you got 4 days and you're done the whole house. Well, you want to charge $2,000 a day. So $2,000 for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, $8,000 a week. Fridays cleanup, quality control, you're out of there. So I'm going to say to a client in this hypothetical situation, I'm going to charge you $8,000 to be here for 4 days. I won't talk about timing right away. I'll say I'll charge $8,000. You're going to get this entire wall, this whole floor is going to be framed. It'll be awesome. You'll have like the second story of your house, I promise. And your client goes, wow, I get a whole second story of a house for $8,000. I am not saying that's accurate numbers. I'm using simple math to convey simple concept here so you get to sort that out. But if I was to be a finish carpenter and walk in and go, what can I accomplish in a day? Well, I might be able to hang one set of cabinets, like one set of the cabinets in a kitchen, because a kitchen might take me a week to do. So for that same amount of money, $2,000 a day, they get 4 cabinets installed really nicely, hung properly, all the hinges are aligned, all the handles are put on, drilled properly, everything's done really well. That's awesome. Then day 2, you do the lowers, and then you move over here and you do the pantry. So by the end of the week, the client has 4 sets of cabinets installed. I think that'll be a harder sell, just thematically, because the finished carpentry requires so much more precision. And if you have what you want to produce in a day and you want to get charged that for a day, you're still limited by your daily productivity capacity. And finished carpentry requires more attention to detail. Finished details, we're thinking like UX design. Sometimes I can get you most of a blog written in an hour, but it might take 6 hours of editing and back and forth and proofreading and spelling and punctuation and formatting. So like the rough draft, you can bang it out and it's done. But then you spend 4 times the amount and you've really modified 15% of the whole thing, but it took 400% more effort. And so again, in your context, roughing out a website design versus fine tuning, to the pixel where the graphic goes in the corner, the logos, whatnot, where all the buttons linking buttons. Man, I know from my own website, it's like, it takes time and sometimes the links don't work. It doesn't go the right form and all these things. It's like, that takes a ton of time. I felt like we built the whole website and then we spent the equivalent amount of time just tweaking the website. So this is applicable in other industries, but what I wanted to say is if I said to the client, hey, I'm going to charge you $8,000 and you're going to get 4 sets of cabinets hung, or I'm going to charge you $8,000 and you're going to get the entire second floor of your house built, the perception of productivity in the course elements, the framing elements, and are just, it's just so much higher. It is simply higher. And that's something worth knowing. So when you're pricing things, sometimes the draw is to be elite in what we do. Like, just so we're the best of the best. Everyone else is like miter joints to a 32nd of an inch, while I'm a 64th. At some point, there's diminishing returns because your client's not going to pay you more money to do something more precise necessarily. And it's why, looking back to how we price, sometimes I'll decide, looking at construction, again, just a metaphor, I'll decide that I want to do everything up to the drywall. But drywall, baseboards, painting, I'll leave that for somebody else. I'll actually choose not to quote it because it takes a lot of time, a lot of back and forth, drywall, mud, sand, then we got paint, second coat paint. It's like, it requires a ton of time. And the client doesn't feel like they got a whole ton done versus what I'm able to convey as value when I say, I'm going to come in, we're going to take all the rotten stuff out of your house, we're going to brace your house up, dismantle it, get rid of all the rot, put in new lumber, we're going to get it inspected, we're going to resheet it, stucco it, and it's basically back up to lockup. The client's like, oh my goodness, and we're going to do that in a week, and we're going to cover so much territory, and it feels so, we're getting things done. And it's the sense of, wow, look at what they've done, versus I can spend almost, I can demolish most of a, well, I can demolish a lot of a building in a day, or I can really nicely cut in the paint on a master bedroom. And it's just the significance of what you're able to charge as a daily rate that the client will tolerate is just so much different. So I wanted to speak to that because if you're going to become the super precise person, there's going to be limitations versus the, hey, we do the coarse strokes, we do the broad strokes, we do the, or something super simple like mowing lawns. It's just a coarse thing. It's just get in, it's simple, move on. Cut your grass, weed whack, move on. Versus weeding, versus maybe pruning. It might seem more glamorous to be the person sculpting the shrubs to look like, you know, animals. That, and there might be a space for a client that wants to pay for that, but I bet you most won't. And if you're looking at the aggregate of who you're trying to sell your services to, just be attentive to that, especially if you're selling your services to the individual client. There's a difference, there's a nuance here. So if your client profile is you're working for somebody else in an urgent, necessary work category, and they're not spending their money, they're paying for completion. Well, in that sense, I might be able to say, hey, listen, we have a daily rate. I can, in this week, I can build your entire second floor, and the next week, I can do the cabinets in your kitchen. It'll cost you $16,000. And they might say, thank you for just doing it. And they're not going to necessarily go, yeah, but the whole floor or the cabinets are the same price. They're going to look at it and go, thank you for completion, because that's the way they perceive value. So we talked before about the PQC DSM. Just a quick recap, that's how clients perceive value: productivity, quality, cost, delivery time, safety, and morale. So productivity, just getting it done, awesome. Again, your cost consciousness, again, if you're somebody's cost conscious, they're going to feel like they got a lot for their dollars. Probably not going to pay for the super precise approach to work. So there's another part of this. You know, I'm talking about, so it's fine-tooth details or course outlines and frameworks and things like that. You can sketch things out relatively quickly and get like 80% of the way there for 20% of the effort. I think that's where the profitability is, because you get 80% of the productivity, which means you kind of get 80% of the profitability, the potential project cost ability of that, of what you're working on. The last 20% can take a whole other 80% of the work. So, and you don't get, the client's not going to go, well, I'm going to pay 80% for this last 20%. Like, they're not, that just doesn't work in my mind. I don't know that it works in most people's mind that I speak with. So just be attentive to that. because clients do have expectations of what they're willing to pay for and things. It's also a really big risk profile, and this is what I wanted to get to here. Things that are subject to scrutiny pose risk to you. Now, I don't know about you, but I've walked into lots of houses and I've just seen bad drywall, bad paint, blemishes on the wall, and things that didn't look finished. I was like, oh my goodness, even in new homes. Spent a lot of time in new homes where it just, oh, that doesn't look good. Was it the framer that made it not look good? Was it the drywaller? Was it the drywall sanding, mudding that doesn't look good? Or was it the paint? I can tell you who gets blamed: the painter. So the last person in the room, the painter, is subject to the scrutiny of the owner going, not good enough, I'm not paying because I'm not happy with this. Even if it was the framer who did a poor job lining up his boards and the wall does this as it goes, and you can see that, and then the drywall mudder, even if they're a fantastic drywall mudder, they can't cover that up because the drywall is just kind of stuck to following the wood to some degree. Or maybe the drywall mudder is lazy and there's a bunch of unsanded parts and they didn't do a good job, and the painter still gets stuck having to fix that. If it's terrible, they might call the drywall mudder back, which again is why I might hang the drywall in the house. I don't want to do the mudding, sanding, taping, painting. I don't want to do that from a business standpoint, because those are the things that everybody looks at. They're scrutinizable. It's not to say that there's an excuse for bad work. I'm not saying do the work that gets buried. So the framing that's behind this wall right here, it's hidden. It has to go through a framing inspection to make sure that it's compliant, so that it's structurally sufficient, so that it serves this really important role of holding the building up, which is kind of where I want to be. I want to do the important part. Not to say painting's not important. I've done lots of painting. I'm just saying, like, this, it's structurally critical. You know, what color the wall is isn't structurally critical, but how the building's built is structurally critical. So it's necessary, sense of urgency to it. Okay, perfect. Once it's passed inspection, it's buried and gone. And the subject, and oftentimes it's earlier on in the process, so I can submit for payment. You know, so if there's any challenges with financing on the project that come later on, well, the painter's the last person to get paid because they're the last one on site. Framing's kind of like at the 1/3 mark. So once the excavation and the concrete's all in, well, now you're in framing. So the money flows sooner, the turnover sooner, your productivity per day is sooner or is more. You can typically charge a higher rate because the perception of productivity is like, oh yeah, I'll pay these guys $2,500. Look how much they're getting done. It's worth it. You know, the sense of what we've accomplished for this much money is worth it. And once it's done, it's buried and other people build on top of that. So do a great job so that you facilitate whatever framing is for you. I don't care if it's code at the back end of in a DevOps scenario. Do a great job so that whoever gets to build after you is really thankful that you were there first. Do that. Be that. And also know that you can check the box and move on, and you're not, if the owner gets frustrated with a project for whatever reason, all the emotional elements that people bring to projects, they don't bring that frustration, if that's what it is, to the I'm just pissed and I'm looking for reasons why I shouldn't have to pay, and the last person in here was that one, and and they just point and look and point. And these are where I see trades end up having to go back and back and back and back and back again. All that time, you don't get paid to rebuild that time typically. And there's hostility and tension in the room. And once you got people picking apart your work, it's a downhill slide, because then it's never good enough. Now you're under the microscope, and then there's scrutiny. So if legitimately the painter did do a bad job and he has to go back, that's legitimate. That's a terrible place to be, because being under that microscope of scrutiny is it's tough. So if you're going to orient your business in a particular way, my suggestion is that you orient it into the early stages, coarse strokes, rather than being the fine stroke, fine finished product of that. Is there business in the finished product? Yes. If you're the person, if there's a client that's paying for custom clear cherry cabinets and they want the best installer to install them and they care about that 32nd or 64th, that might be your client profile that cares about quality above all things, and they want you because you're the one they trust. awesome. I'm just acknowledging that that's not the bulk of clients. And my pursuit to become the best took me down a path where I found myself outpriced for what I could service the market for. So anyways, it just causes some pivots, causes some reflections. Be who you are authentically. And if you need to be the best and you just can't live with yourself, working inside of a broad stroke kind of way, then don't. Don't do it because I said so. But if you're like, hey, where do I go so that there's space for myself, there's space for my team, it's easier to train junior framers to get it right than it is to train junior cabinet finishers to get it right. Like, there's the learning curve and the cost of that training and the ability to empower others to go out on their own and you not have to be there. So you can do that thing of working on your business instead of working in your business, which I think I'm dwindling away from that psychology, because I think we should embody what we do. Work on it like it's this separate object. And like, how about you just be whole and present where you are while you're doing what you're doing with the people that you're fortunate enough to have alongside you, and not take that for granted, and be in the midst, rather than be on the outside. Life's so much more fulfilling when you're engaged rather than observing. So take that for what it is. I think there's a lot of opportunity here. Definitely narrows the scope down. If you're coming in early, you're doing the core stuff, you're not afraid to just find ways to be efficient and productive. Again, when you get paid for units of productivity, there's just certain tasks, responsibility, jobs that allow you to be hyper productive. And again, that rewards your innovation, that rewards your capacity. And then ultimately the value that you can exchange with clients and the things that you can charge for. But yeah, thank you for being on this journey with me. I trust that was we covered some ground, and I'm hopeful that it's informative for you. I'm doing this because it's the very best that served us and our organization, and I want to share it with you. Have a great one.